Mangroves is the name given to shrubs or trees that live in the intertidal zones of tropical or subtropical regions. The classification of these plants can be quite complex, with true and associated species. But in general, there's about 50 to 110 species of mangroves. The environments where mangroves live can be quite hostile, and so mangroves have some amazing adaptations to help them deal with this. Mangroves live in salty environments, and sometimes it can be 2 or even 3 times saltier than seawater. They've come up with a few different ways to adapt to this. The first is to block that salt water from entering their tissues in the first place. The second way is to be able to get rid of that excess salt once it's inside of their tissues. And they can do this through 2 different ways. The first way is to remove that excess salt water by pushing it out through their leaves. Once the water evaporates off the top, they're then left with salt crystals on their leaves. The second way is to store all of that excess salt in their leaves. This causes the leaves to become plump and look a bit like succulents. Once they reach their threshold, these leaves will then drop off the tree, taking all of that salt with them. Every part of a plant needs oxygen. Most land plants can get this oxygen for their roots from within the soil. However, the soil where mangroves live don't have enough oxygen to do this. So they have special aerial roots called pneumatophores. There are a few different types of these pneumatophores, and some include pencil roots, cone roots, stilt roots, and buttress roots. These special roots also offer protection and stability from storm surges by absorbing high wave energy. Now, these conditions don't sound too gentle for new baby mangroves. So another adaptation allows the seeds of the mangroves to germinate while they're still attached to their parent tree. When this happens, they're called propagules. And after a while, they'll drop off, float around in the tide for a little bit, and then find the perfect spot to plant themselves and continue growing. Mangroves also have a whole range of non-blue carbon related importance for our ecosystems and the Earth. They act as a buffer for strong waves and big storms, and can absorb up to 90% of the impact from these storm surges. Mangroves also trap sediment and pollution as it washes off from land in towards the seagrass and corals. And if the mangroves weren't there and the sediment reached the seagrass and corals, it would smother them. Mangrove forests are also home to many different species of animals. While the forests themselves might only have a few different species of mangroves, they'll have hundreds of other species of animals, such as fish, birds, and crustaceans. Mangroves are often thought of as smelly, dirty places, a little bit like the armpit of the ocean. But as we've learnt from today, they're these beautiful habitats and ecosystems that are very important for the Earth and the animals that live on it. We know that mangroves are great at burying carbon, and the soil of their environments is great at stopping that carbon from being broken down and released into the atmosphere again. But apart from taking sediment cores, how can we do an experiment to find out if an environment is good at storing carbon? Okay. And that's where our teabag experiment comes in. We are going to give you the basics of this experiment, but if you want to learn more about this experiment in detail, you can find further information in a link below. So let's look back at those 5 steps that make a scientist. The first is question. So our question will be, is this environment good for storing carbon? And the second part is your hypothesis. Now this will depend on the types of environments that you've chosen, and should also tie into that research that you did earlier on about carbon storing environments. If there's not much oxygen in the soil that you've chosen, then that would be a great place to store carbon. Third are the steps we need to take in our experiment. So we're going to find a location. Now this doesn't have to be a blue carbon environment, but it does have to be an area where you're allowed to dig up a little bit of the ground. Once you've decided on your location, you should mark it with something like a stick or a pole. Then dig a narrow 8 centimeter deep hole Place the tea bag in with the tag on the surface and fill the hole in again so you can still see the tag. Then, wait 30 to 90 days, dig up the tea bag again and inspect the tea bag and the tea leaves inside of it. Now the tea leaves inside of the tea bag are a source of organic carbon, and in an oxygen-rich environment will break down, but in an environment that doesn't have much oxygen, the tea leaves will stay mostly intact. One thing to note with your experiment, if you're using a paper tea bag like this one here, the paper itself is also a source of organic carbon, so that may break down as well. Try testing several different environments around you and make sure to take a photo of your tea bags before and after your experiment. The final step is to communicate. Send us pictures of your experiment as well as any observations that you've made and the environments that you've chosen. And congratulations, you've conducted an experiment to see which environments near you are good at storing carbon.